speaker, Carsten Lemme. Carsten will offer a unique perspective on leadership, exploring the role of COVID fatigue in students and the impact this has had on his teaching and mentor style. Carsten Lemme is a holistic designer based in Mexico City. Educated at the Design Academy Eindhoven in the Netherlands, he started to hone his skills as a model, builder, sculptor at Joris Larman Labs before leaving Europe to live and work in Mexico. Here, he established himself as an industrial designer, collaborating with Ariel Rojo Design Studio and Rojkin Arquitectos before setting up his own practice as an eclectic designer exploring the larger context for clients and self-started projects. In the last few years, Carsten started to share his knowledge as a teacher. At the University Anuak Norte, Sur, and Centro, he teaches courses about content development and material design. Welcome, Carsten. The floor is yours.
Hello. Let me quickly share my screen and then we can start. Hi, everybody. First of all, switch up. As already mentioned in the introduction, I'm Carsten. I'm a designer and educator in Mexico City. And I got here by a fairly long way. I got born in Germany, got educated in the Netherlands, and then fled to the sunshine to Mexico City. And today I'm going to talk to you about COVID jet lag and how I got to this definition. I will explain throughout this presentation. But first, I would like to start from the beginning, right? I mean, this type of view, I think, is now familiar to everybody. Thanks to the COVID and the quarantine, we fled our universities and retreated to our homes and started connecting via Zoom and taught over Zoom. Here, a little overview of one of my first students from that time, holding up one of the prototypes. And it was a very surprising new experience of teaching and learning for everybody. And the most surprising thing for me was that in the end, we were kind of more isolated than ever, right? We were not anymore sharing the same space, but at the same time, it became more intimate. Through these little square windows of the Zoom organization, we had a view into somebody's life. I mean, we would see the student only in the classroom, and now we actually saw them in their own spaces. We saw their families walking sometimes in the background, somebody bringing them coffee in the morning. And so it was kind of strange for us all. And I think we all gained and lost something through this time. And I would like to first start with, I think, what we gained. Thanks to the COVID pandemic, we were 100% remote, especially in Mexico City. That was kind of a pleasant experience because traffic is not our strongest suit here. So a lot of students were traveling for hours to get to the university and back. And now, literally, the students will get up in the morning, fall out of bed and be present, which was kind of nice. But we also learned to use new tools, right? I mean, a lot of schools, I think, are familiar with Brightspace, and where we were not really happy with Brightspace, was not really a very visual tool for us to work with as designers. So we introduced Miro as well. And of course, from the beginning, we were stopped off going out. We were confined in our little four walls. And so going out as a designer to do your research was very, very difficult. But the students and us as teachers, we became very creative and transversed everything into the digital space. And we learned how to do WhatsApp surveys or Facebook group research. And my personal favorite, or for me, the most surprising one was TikTok. That they had no idea that there was so much knowledge to gain from that little tool. And last but not all, file size issues. I mean, all of a sudden, in the early days, we would just bring our work to school or university and would show off what we have done. And now we have all this administration extra to do to show our work that, to explain the student that he can't upload his 2 GB presentation was kind of a task as well. Just to kind of explain this new way of working and how much more complicated it became, where we always thought that, the digital transformation makes everything so much easier. I just kind of quickly visualized it for a normal sketch and how you get from a pen to my feedback. Now, I mean, normally we would take a pen, we would take a piece of paper, we would make a sketch, and then at home, most probably, or somewhere in a cafe, and then the student would come the next day to class and would show me his drawing, he would get his feedback. But this doesn't work anymore in the new world of Zoom meetings. And we, as I said before, we introduced Miro as a tool. And then, yeah, how do you get from this physical object to a digital one? Of course, you have to make a picture because nobody has a scanner anymore, or they have to make a picture with their phone, but then they have to connect the phone with their laptop, or send themselves an email, then save it, and then upload it again. And of course, in the beginning, they all didn't have an account in Miro, so it became very complicated. There were so many steps in between where normally we were used to just be present and very simply show our work. So a lot of students actually converted to something similar. So instead of uploading their work to the whiteboard, they would just simply hold up their sketch to the screen and then reduce this beautiful sketch of theirs to 520p with bad lighting, and then everything in this small screen. We were looking, yeah, that looks kind of good. So it was pretty strange. We had to learn a lot of new ways of working, and we lost some very important things because industrial design is very much rooted in the physicality of things, which is not only in the final object, but also in the process. We are not only thinking with our eyes or with in a 2D dimension, but we smell, we touch, we taste, and we were removed from each other from so far away. And luckily, we didn't invent yet smelling Zoom. So there was always a part of the information missing. They would always hold up the material they wanted to work with. And we said, yeah, that feels okay. I think that's okay. Where in the normal classroom, we would pass around the samples and everybody could smell and touch it and simply say, and start thinking with their hand or with their nose. And, the part of the ideation there was missing, right? Another part, again, not having this shared space also simply said that we couldn't have the theater of interaction. No, I mean, the product is not only its visual component, but also how it is used, in which context is it used. Now, normally somebody would make a model and you would pass it on, you simply say, oh, look, this ergonomic doesn't work, or this material is not strong enough to do so. Now, instead of holding it now up to a camera, so we say, oh, that looks okay. Or making a video, again, over 5 steps, you could explain the same, but with more effort. No? So it became less intuitive in a way. And very important, of course, we were missing the workshops. We were missing them a lot. A lot of students were working from their bedrooms, which was, of course, not equipped with a sewing table or an epoxy safe work table. So work became smaller. And I think the most important thing we were missing were our peers. Going to university doesn't mean that you only come for my feedback. I wish, but no. There's a lot more to the equation. And the student doesn't not only learn from his tutor, but also from his peers. Now, normally when I have a student next to me, we have one-to-one feedback. And the rest of the class is in the back and actually having a conversation about their own work or just about life, right? Or they go right after class out for a coffee, and then new ideas spring up. I think the whole environment of the university is its own tool as well. And now we would only go to the Zoom classes, have our 50 minutes of fame and log off, and then we are alone. I think it was a very scary time for some of the students. So to the outcomes of what happened was, as I already said, everything became a little bit more complicated, right? We didn't choose so, but everything when it becomes digital, we have to learn new ways of working. So the way we think, the way we work was becoming more complicated. There were steps in between. Everything needed to be uploaded to some kind of server somewhere, or some kind of new tool we had to learn, of course, from scratch. And therefore, the project became more conceptual, by the missing of the workshops, some students were kind of brave enough to go out and work together with the craftsmen, but most of them were just basically reducing their output to a manageable size, which would fit on their desk in their bedroom. And therefore, the process became more and more linear. Everything was step by step, and we would just tick off achievements, but it was missing the try and error. Like we had a lot of students when they built their first models, and you would say, "Yeah, that's a great achievement, but let's do 2 more, change this, change that. Let's explore a little bit a different scale." And then somebody said, "No, I can't. I don't have material." So everything stops again. Then you have to wait that they can order material, and it became less spontaneous. And therefore, also under the line, the student became less productive. We saw the output of the student becoming less and less and less over the periods of that time. And luckily, we came out of it, right? We are now already for 2 semesters back on campus. And what we expected actually was from the beginning that it would be pure happiness, right? So now we are all free again. We can come back to campus. Yes, we were wearing our protective gear, but at least we were back together. We were back to normal, we thought. And no, unfortunately, it didn't go as quick as expected. And this is what I call the COVID jet lag. And it manifested itself in a way that students were very quiet in the beginning. And also when they would come to class, they would be very little in a certain way. Some didn't even bring their pencils. Or they would bring their research, but it would be in 15 slides on an iPad instead of simply saying, "Oh, look, now we have all this space. Look, let's use it," right? Go print it out, put it on the wall, and then we can work as a team together and really see what we are doing. But it felt more and more that they were stuck in this then old way of working, of this digital learning, that everything was kind of intangible. And also the motivation level was on a very low level. And in the beginning, I was thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? I mean, this is my class. What is the cause of this dismotivation inside of the student? And doing a little bit of research, I came across some beautiful articles from the New York Times and the Chronicle of Higher Education, and which described similar symptoms in their students, that they had the idea that they were very disconnected, that they didn't have anymore the joy of learning, that they would, sleep through class. I mean, in my case, it wasn't that severe, luckily, but everybody was just very tired. It has this really feeling of that the students were in some kind of burnout mode, which was very sad. My mouse just got stuck. One moment. And I think one of the reasons why this was so severe is by a simple fact that change is very hard. It's it's very hard for everybody. And for the student, it was even worse because they were not in control of anything, right? It was not, they didn't choose to go home and learn in a digital way. They didn't really choose to come back in that moment. So I think one of what brought this melancholy was, of course, also students lost their loved ones, but also just being constantly thrown around like a tennis ball from left to right, from either working only online or fully on campus. It was just, they didn't know when to do what anymore. It was very confusing. And every time when you go to university, every day is new, right? You should be learning every day something incredibly new about your profession, but therefore everything else should kind of stay the same, right? Because then you can focus on just learning this one new thing, but then how you deliver your deliveries can stay the same, and then you can kind of concentrate on what is new. And another research I did, because I'm always very interested in the behavior of people. Also, something I learned from my time as a consultant in healthcare, is just why do we get this burnout? Of course, this change is one part of it. But then I found this tweet by Dan Ariely, a well-known behavioral economist, Actually, every service designer out there, please read his books. It's very insightful. And when you got asked about the medical burnout in the medical field, of course, in COVID, we put a lot of pressure on the medical staff. They did a lot of overhours. But why were they burning out so much? And he said that bureaucracy was the biggest reason for that, right? Because as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, also there were all these little steps you had to force somebody to do his delivery, right? But he, as he says in this tweet also, the more bureaucracy you put into a process, the less trust you show to somebody, right? And I think the student to do his best work, he needs to feel safe and trusted, and that he can do what he's there to do, to learn, right? And I noticed that I exactly did that in the last semesters in the pandemic. I noticed when I look back to the assignments I gave in that period of time, because I saw slowly the decline of work, I thought, okay, let's make it simpler. No, let's make it more strategic. Let's plan further ahead. And I noticed that I started giving the precise starting point, the precise end point, and then specific spots in between, which narrows the scope immensely, because I thought, okay, I want to have a great outcome for the student. I want to have a great model in the end. So I tell them exactly what to do. And I noticed it was exactly the wrong thing to do, to the degree that even students in one semester actually rebelled against one of my assignments because they said it was too narrow. It was a simple fix towards it. We opened it up to a more conceptual thought pattern and saved the semesters bravely with that. But I learned something important in that moment, because in the end, everybody has his own way of working, right? And then the digital field kind of forced us to narrow things down because we thought we would get better outcomes for it. But we forgot that each student is actually an individual. And so the first thing I changed after the pandemic was to give more liberal assignments and to customize the way students can walk to the finish line. Because in the end, what we also have to acknowledge is design is not anymore just industrial design or graphics design. The profession is splitting up in so many specialities. And just to say, name a few, of course, there's the industrial designer, there's a product designer, there's a material designer, there's a service designer today, there's the researchers, of course. And one of the latest additions I see in the profession is also the facilitator, somebody who's actually facilitating these design processes to others. And I think they all need to be acknowledged in the process of design, because each student has a talent somewhere. So what changes did I apply? First of all, I tried to focus not only on the outcome, but first and foremost on supporting the joy and play. I wanted to see high motivation in my class. I didn't want to just have a stick in my hand, do, and finish. But I wanted to see them actually explore their profession. Because in the end, they have to, I mean, ideally, they're going to do it for the rest of their life, right? And I would like them to do their profession with a smile in their face. And so, as I mentioned before, I noticed that in the end of the pandemic became more strict in what we have to do. So I was breaking down the bureaucracy through customization. So, which means I gave more open assignments, so less strict, so that the student could find his own purpose inside each assignment. Because then they can show their personal qualities and they motivate themselves through driving the process by their personal curiosity. Because then they feel that they are sitting in the driver's seat, right? And when you feel that in the driver's seat, then it's really joy to learn. These are some outcomes of the last semester I gave. just to explain what it means to have an open assignment. So this assignment was to how to take care of something or someone, and which came with a little brief of mine about what I thought the subject was about. And with the first assignment of to go out and interview 12 different people. People you know, people you have close by, people you can visit in a safe way because we are not still that safe on our feet outside. And here you see just three outcomes of this assignment. But actually, I had 22 students, and not one product was repeated. Everybody had his own personal point of view on design and what it means to take care of something. Just to explain one, on the far left, we see Anna Sophia's work, which she interviewed her family, and the whole family was very much into meditation. But she found it very sad that people sometimes are physically not able to keep the posture long enough to really meditate for an extended period of time, and were mostly confined to their own home. And so she designs this beautiful meditation chair out of foam, which people could carry around into nature to meditate. Or Aranza, which chose her favorite pet in her house, her dog, to how can I take better care of her? And she noticed that the leash, the harness was made from so many unsustainable parts. And so she designed her own new version, where in her case, we were actually very focused straight after the midterm to get it produced. So instead of working more on design-specific questions, we were asking ourselves, okay, how can we convey our concept to a producer, to an investor? No, where on the other hand, with Alex, for example, she designed this beautiful incense holder, which is absolutely mesmerizing. She made model after model after model of just looking at how this smoke can fall down these stairs or fall down the surface. So here, just by these three examples, I think we can see very clearly that the student itself does have drive, right? As long as we let him to drive himself. So what have I learned about leadership in this time? What I've learned, I want to summarize in these 3 points. I think creativity is best led with a soft hand. Because I think somebody already 8 hours earlier in a panel described it this way, that you don't teach a bird to fly, you just feed him and keep him safe until he just takes off, right? And I think in design, it's the same. The students already come as a designer with a certain drive to the university. We are just there to support them to find their own way of working, because not everybody creates the same way, right? Some people start from the material, some people start with the context. I mean, we all have to grasp to something to get our brain working, and that is not the same for everybody. And of course, energy first. As I mentioned in some slides before, I want to see my student smile, right? I don't want him to see his assignment as work. He has to do it from his own belief. And they also want, right? I mean, they know that they're creative and they want to show off this creativity. And they have already a habit and a behavior which normally shows that some people draw very nicely, some people make videos, and you just need to listen what they want to do and just support that existing behavior, or maybe slightly tweak it to teach them in the right moment, the right methodologies. But it's not for everybody the same. So don't assign assignments, right? The more strict something goes, the more strict an assignment is, the more work the student needs to actually wiggle himself into it, which of course in the professional field is at times the case. But I think it's better to assign for purpose. A larger subject allows the student to actually find himself inside an assignment, a subject, right? Like, how do we take care of things? Now, what are your hobbies? What is close to you? What is growing out from within you, right? Because then you can also, I always try to ask my student, okay, who do you think you are as a designer, right? And mostly they don't, I don't know, I'm an interior designer or something, but they don't have a clear answer to it. And I think when we give them the opportunity to explore that purpose for themselves as a designer as well, then they have a better prospect of driving themselves to a very good career with their own speciality. And one point I didn't write on this page, but I think is still very important, is that if you want to create leaders in design, the most important thing to teach, I think, is to make your autonomous decision about something, to have an opinion about something. And that is best by letting them make their own decisions very early on with the consequences, and then just support them through it as a guide. No? So on the top page, I said I'm an educator, but I think I'm rather a coach. I'm rather somebody who supports the ideal of the identity of a specific student, and then teach him specific things he's missing in certain moments, instead of just driving everybody like a train through the same education to the same outcome, which is most probably not really relevant for them in that very moment. And the last point, I think the kids are right. No, I think it is not as dark as we can read in some of these New York Times articles. The thing about, I also called it the COVID jet lag, because I think it's more about it's temporary. As I said, we let them. They have to get used to one modality. They have to get used to this one way of working, and then I think we see again a rise in output, a rise in motivation, and therefore a better education. With this, I thank you all.
And I think you've perfectly encapsulated kind of the gray area in which we sit now. We're post-COVID, but we're not sure if it's the end of COVID, and kind of what does that mean for the future of academia and education. We do have a couple of minutes left, so if you don't mind, I'd like to keep you around for one or two questions before we move on to our next session. I did want to ask you if you feel like COVID will have a lasting impact on the generation that started university in 2020.
I'm pretty sure it does, yeah. But not in the way we think it is. As I said, the articles I read were actually very bleak. They say that these students will be kind of in limbo for a very long time, but I don't think so. I think it will have the opposite effect, that they actually will be far more passionate about the real world, about the physical world, about other people. Because it's kind of, we all had hardship, if we now lost a family member or not, but it's a collective trigger for more empathy. Because this is one moment where we all had together the same experience. So basically we created a baseline. And I think that will help actually to create designs which are far more empathetic than before.
Do you feel like there was some of your colleagues who maybe didn't adapt to this new virtual environment as well as you did?
I think it's very hard to judge. I mean, as I said, for us, everything was new as well. I mean, luckily in my case, I already did before design sprints and other facilitation through the digital media. So I was kind of a little bit primed in it, but also not in that extent, of course. And I think everybody was finding their own way of teaching the right way. I don't think that anybody got stuck, as far as I know.
Of course. And you mentioned now that you're back to fully in-person learning. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that process and how you navigated that as a leader and a mentor for your students as they transition from virtual learning back to the in-person environment.
In our case, it was actually very interesting because we had both. I mean, I was teaching at the time the same class on 2 different days in the week. So one day we had presential teaching, and the other part we did full online. So it was actually step by step we were walking out of the pandemic. It was not that a big clash. But now that we are fully back, I'm putting a lot of emphasis that they really bring physical things to class. We are dancing in class, we're doing theater in class, which is really just starting to whirlwind with the whole body again, because it needed to be triggered again, and to allow them to be crazy in this in this new way. To allow them again to be presential with the whole body in mind.
Do you feel like there's anything from the virtual environment that you'll keep as you adapt to the in-person learning once again?
Yeah, especially on the presentation side. Now, in the end, design, before we would always do presentations on the table. And now, since the student is very, very good with Canva and other things, I think we keep this kind of digital history of all our work. I think it's something we learned in that time very well, that we have to document more precisely our process.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I think, Carsten, that brings us perfectly to the end of our session today. I want to thank you so much for your joining us today as part of our World Industrial Design Day program.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I hope you have a great day.
You too.